Good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and do the kind of webinar intro and logistics as people keep trickling in here. Welcome to the third Thursday Web Forum for the Southeast Conservation Adaptation Strategy, or SECAS partnership. This is our first Web Forum of 2026, so Happy New Year to everyone. My name is Hillary Morris. As always, I'm your host, and I work on user support and communications for the Southeast Conservation Blueprint. We host this web forum on the third Thursday of every month to share the latest updates on the blueprint, get input and involvement from folks like y'all, and highlight exciting science and action in the world of landscape conservation in the Southeast and Caribbean. So I'll start here with a quick agenda. I'll introduce our speakers who will present for 40 minutes or so. There should be time for Q&A and discussion after that, and then I'll wrap up by previewing our February web forum. As a heads up, you probably noticed I am recording this webinar just as an option for the handful of folks who inevitably wanted to attend but had a conflict, and I'll post the link to that recording from the calendar event on the SECAS website and to the registration page of this webinar, probably by early next week. If you ever have trouble finding that, you're always welcome just to shoot me an email and I'd be happy to pass on the link to the recording. Anyone have questions or comments before I proceed with introducing our speakers? All right, not hearing any, let's go ahead and proceed. I am excited to introduce three different speakers from the Southeastern Grassland Institute today. They're going to be giving us an under-the-hood peek of Grasslandia, SGI's forthcoming All Things Southeast Grasslands website. So we have Chip Morgan, who is a GIS analyst, Theo Witzel, who is co-founder and chief conservation officer, and Dwayne Estes, who is co-founder and executive director of SGI. So with that, folks, you can go ahead and take it away.
All right. Well, Hillary, thanks so much for having us. And we are delighted to speak with everybody today as part of the SECAS event. And also would like to welcome one of the other members of our team, Gabrielle Patterson, who is our historian for SGI, who's based in Louisiana. So you'll notice that we have added Gabrielle also to the authorship of this presentation. So we're excited to talk to you about something that we've been working on now for almost a decade, at least in concept. And we'll tell you about Grasslandia, which is a developing web portal and decision support tool. Theo's going to be advancing slides for me. So Theo, I'll trust you to take us forward here. First, a little bit about our organization. SGI is still fairly new on the scene of American conservation. We are now going into our 10th year here in 2026. We are based at Austin Peay State University in Tennessee. And our region includes 24 states that stretches from Florida and Texas north to parts of Missouri and even to Long Island, New York. And across that expanse, which is about a 500 million acre landscape, we are putting together data that suggests that, somewhere around probably 40% of that landscape historically largely consists of open ecosystems: prairies, savannas, woodland, open woodlands, marshes, glades, barrens, balds, etc. We've been developing our team and growing a team over the past 10 years. And this year, we're now a team of almost 60 dispersed across much of the South. And we're rapidly sort of growing organization with a lot of ambition. And we're guided equally both by science as well as American history. Just in the past quarter of 2025, we hired about 13 new employees, and you can see a lot of the sort of silhouettes there on the left, a lot of the smiling faces of about the 60 people that make up our team. We really were inspired first by the book that Dr. Reed Noss published called Forgotten Grasslands of the South. This was sort of a call to action to us. Theo and I both were friends with Reed and inspired by Dr. Noss and what he had in his book about the importance of the southeastern grasslands, which includes this wonderful array of open grassy ecosystems, some of which I've already called out by name. And I want to bring attention to the foreword of that book, which was written by the preeminent naturalist ecologist from Harvard, E.O. Wilson, who coined the term the southern grassland biome as part of that forward. And he said the southern grassland biome is probably the richest terrestrial biome in all of North America. To understand, cherish, and preserve the great natural heritage of the southern grassland biome should be a priority goal in America's environmental movement. Let those words sink in. Should be a priority goal in America's environmental movement. When those words were written in 2012, 2013, grasslands still weren't very much really not a priority goal in America, especially not in the southeastern United States. So again, this was also a call to action. And today, much of our work is guided around Dr. Noss's leadership and the words of E.O. Wilson. So one of the things that Reed was not really able to address, at least not in a lot of detail in his book, is exactly where were southern grasslands. You know, in 1993, Hal DeSalm and Nora Murdoch had mapped some of the more prairie-like types of southern grasslands. There were other maps showing the eastern tall grass with some of those grasslands coming into parts of the Mid-South. But by and large, there was no one map that showed where all of the grasslands were in all the various sort of types, the savannas, the open woodlands, the marshes, the glades. You couldn't go to one place to find them all. And so even as recently as, as 2013, in this map of America's grasslands, written by our colleagues at the World Wildlife Fund and NatureServe, by and large, southern grasslands were sort of left off of the national map, so to speak. So our region, SGI's focal region shown there in the green outline, became an area of intense focus for us. In order for us to grow an organization and to grow a mission of saving southeastern grasslands, we knew we had to first understand where they are, where they were and where they are today. Next. Part of the challenge of southeastern grasslands and the southern grassland biome is this wave of loss. If you were to look here at this sort of animation, you'll see that the grasslands along the East Coast in places like Philadelphia and Baltimore and Raleigh and Chapel Hill largely were gone before the American Revolution. And as you progress west of the Appalachians, eventually out across the Mississippi River, you'll see that sort of erosion of those grasslands over time. So that if you're out at in the Dallas-Fort Worth area today, you still have a lot of active grassland loss that's happening, sort of on the forefront of that loss. What we've come to realize is after 400 years of change, southern grasslands have been largely eliminated, and they've been gone so long, they've sort of been erased from our collective memory as a society. And the timing couldn't be worse because right now the Southeast is undergoing a rapid explosion, fragmentation, habitat destruction that builds on the already 4 centuries of loss that southern grasslands have sustained. Now we know from a wealth of developing biodiversity data that shows that southern grasslands are immensely important, as are all of America's grasslands to biodiversity. A recent study, for example, showed that we have 3 billion fewer birds now compared to, say, 50 years ago. Many of those birds are grassland birds. Our pollinators are in decline. Thousands of native species that need open ecosystems are in decline. Even things like burrowing crayfish and many, many species of insects are in decline as well. Next. So we want to use science plus the information from American history, and that's where Gabrielle's work is immensely important, to help begin to set some goals over the future. But we have some key barriers in place. And just looking at this animation real quick, you'll see we're asking the question, how many acres can SGI as an organization help restore and manage over the next, say, 25 years? How much can our partners do? And we partner with dozens of partners across the South. And then collectively, through extension and outreach and our combined influence, what can we influence to help restore and stabilize southeastern grasslands? Well, one of the big hurdles to that right now, if we think about all the grasslands of the South in sort of this complicated array, almost like a chocolate chip cookie type landscape where you've got remnant grasslands, you've got big anchor grasslands, and you've got sort of these large affected landscapes like residential areas and urban landscapes and rural working landscapes. How do we empower the broader Southeastern community to be able to scale up grasslands conservation and grasslands research? Well, it starts with having a tool that people can access to help bring down the barriers or eliminate barriers to knowledge. So that's where we began to envision Grasslandia. About a decade ago, if you'll go next, we began to envision Grasslandia as a web portal, as an information hub, if you will, where you can go and access information about grassland biodiversity, grassland ecosystems, historical data, historical maps, old settler quotes, Native American records related to grasslands. We wanted to put this information at people's fingertips, and these will be made available in a wide range of Esri ArcGIS story maps. But we want to go beyond that initial vision of Grasslandia, which is set for release late this year or at the start of next year, what we call Grasslandia 1.0. And that's already been funded thanks to a number of funders especially the USDA, Farm Service Agency, and USDA, Natural Resources Conservation Service. But we even had some initial funding for biodiversity-focused work by the National Park Service, which really kind of helped pave the way for some of Grasslandia's development. And so now we're looking ahead at Grasslandia 2.0. And the difference is we want Grasslandia 2.0 to be very interactive, to have decision support capabilities. We want landowners and stewards across the South to be able to work interactively with it, to help address real needs in terms of empowering knowledge for on-the-ground restoration and on-the-ground conservation planning. All, of course, within a map-based framework, and that's where our partners at Esri come into play. So right now, in closing, before I pass it off to Theo, we're currently working all this year with Esri, with about a half a dozen members of their team, to build Grasslandia. So I will pass it off to Theo and appreciate the opportunity very much to speak with you guys today. Thank you.
Thanks, Dwayne. I'm going to step back a little bit and touch on a few things that sort of predated Grasslandia, but that inspired us, or sort of gave us the ideas of how to build Grasslandia, and that are very integral parts of it. One of them is, since SGI started, really, we've been trying to develop some species-based assessment tools centered on plants. And, we hope to expand that beyond plants, but plants are such great indicators of habitat type and quality and restorability, or what we call inherent restoration potential. People are probably all familiar with coefficients of conservatism for plants, these values that give us a sense of their fidelity or their restriction to high quality remnant habitats, like remnant grasslands, remnant forest, versus weedy species. So there's this 1 to 10 scale, with the really weedy generalist species getting these lower values, like a ragweed with a coefficient of conservatism of 1, up to this crested coral root orchid with a conservatism of 10. And so that's one sort of metric of being able to look at plants and have them tell you something. We've also developed a second ranking criteria for species in the Southeast we call the heliophily, which is a measure of how sun dependent a species is, or how shade dependent a species is. So that's a 1 to 9 scale. We developed this with Alan Weekly and his team at the North Carolina Botanical Garden with funding from the National Park Service. And that tells you not how conservative it is. It doesn't tell you that it's only in a prairie remnant, but it tells you that a species is maybe only in open habitat. And we're combining these two indices into something that we're calling the Grassland Fidelity Index, or the Grasslandiness Index, as we say. And that would tell you, based on the flora present in a site, do you have a remnant grassland or a remnant forest, or is it some disturbed habitat or something in between, et cetera. So this is an emerging tool, and we Chip built this incredible web app this app that lets you sort of let the Park Service know for every park they have what ecosystems are in them and what species are in them for grassland ecosystems. And we use this heliophily value to assign, grassland indicator species status to different species. And this helps them with restoration projects and understanding the flora and the ecosystems in these parks. Another big thing we've been involved in is natural community classification. So Dwayne mentioned that in order to conserve grasslands, we have to know where they are and what they are. And because grasslands began being destroyed here 400 years ago, we really have an incomplete picture of what we have. We published a paper led by Reed Noss back in 2021 in the USGS bulletin that identified 118 ecological systems that we defined as open habitats: grasslands, savannas, open woodlands, etc. And we know that there are a whole bunch of other types that are not described. And so they're not even on the radar hardly, or at least they're not getting their due because no one even knows what they are. So for these, like the seepage prairie in the Arkansas Valley of Arkansas and Oklahoma, it has no classification. So a big focus of our work is to get these described and then get the information about them out there. Part of the Grasslandia project is not the web apps and the website, but field teams that are going out. They've now done over 500 Carolina Vegetation Survey plots, the classification plots that describe communities in grassland types in the interior of our region. So the funding for phase one is sort of the interior shown in this map. That's just the first year plots that they did. And we're using these data in the future to describe new types of grasslands in communities. And then Dwayne mentioned we really want to integrate science and history. We can't tell the story of or fully understand the story of the southeastern grasslands just from the science because of that great loss over centuries. But if we incorporate history into the component, we can really break some new ground here. There are these wonderful old maps, for example. Gabrielle Patterson is our historian. I think we're one of the very few, or maybe the only Southeastern conservation organization that employs a historian. And she's been going through 500 years of information about the Southeast and assembling historical information on grasslands. We are integrating a lot of story maps. We've settled on that as sort of an information sharing tool. And this is just one that Gabrielle has worked on just for Louisiana, talking about bison, the history of bison in Louisiana. She's also gone through many historical references, everything from early settler journals to explorer accounts to GLO maps, all of these old historical references. And we are compiling hundreds. We've got over 700 already georeferenced quotes or historical accounts of these, that mention grasslands or other ecosystems that we can sort of put on a map. And we have this huge database, and these are being added to all the time. And we are incorporating volunteer work going forward to help populate that. The Grasslandia website itself, this is an early mock-up of kind of what Dwayne and Chip and I were thinking about it. Wanted to provide accessible information to a wide variety of users. So not just scientists or conservation professionals, but if you were interested in history, if you were interested in if you were interested in birds, everybody would have a sort of a route through, sort of like a choose your own adventure book when I was a kid. You could sort of pick a route through that followed your own interest in making decisions as you went through. To be a series of threads for different user groups, basically. And major categories when you land on the page, categories of information, history, the types of southeastern grasslands, the biodiversity, below the ecosystem level. The types would be the ecosystems or natural community types. Threats to southeastern grasslands, restoration and management information, deeper dives into science. These are sort of the 6 main landing pages. Now that was, we realized pretty quick we needed some professional help to do this. So we contracted with Esri, who are clearly the leaders in a lot of the GIS space, and we decided on using story maps as a major sort of tool to share this information. And they've designed now what it's going to look like. It's pretty slick, looks pretty nice. This is sort of the main mock-up of the landing page. For the different types, we've identified 12 major categories of southeastern grasslands: prairies, barrens, glades, balds, savannas, woodlands, dunes, riparian grasslands, which include high energy river scour system in the mountains, but also large river sandbar grassland complexes, meadows, bogs and fens, and freshwater and salt marshes. And canebrakes might be another type, but those are oftentimes embedded or associated with these other types. For the threats, similarly, each of these have a story map that's being prepared. So if you're interested in specific types of threats and their impacts and what can be done to mitigate those threats, you can go in there and see the history of loss of these grasslands. This is just a mock-up of a deeper dive into science, some of the different science and sort of historical as well. Story maps or areas of information that users will be able to access. And then we have, in addition to those sort of story maps, which would link out to other resources, we have these interactive explorers, these explorer apps. And so we had 5 on the Grasslandia 1.0 plan: Observation Explorer, Biodiversity Explorer, which here is called Species Explorer, Ecosystem Explorer, History Explorer, and something we're calling the Media Explorer. We have a couple of other ones that we're developing for Grasslandia 2.0 in the future. Just to give you a quick introduction, so here is Observation Explorer. We have brought in millions of records of species occurrence from by naturalists. We can also bring in, talking about other things like eBird or their digitized herbarium data sets that allow us to bring in this geospatial data by species. And then, of course, we have the coefficients of conservatism, the heliophily, and the grassland fidelity index that we'll be able to sort these through. And we can go in and see where are the grassland indicator species and so on. Also, the Biodiversity Explorer, get detailed information out, linked to other databases and images of all the species of grasslands in a certain type. You could drill into Nashville Basin, limestone glades, and barrens, see all the species of plants that are going to be found in those, and access information about each one. Similarly, the Ecosystem Explorer. We thought we would be able to map all of the ecosystem types or natural community types across the geography. We will, but we are not there yet. That has been the big underestimation of how difficult this job would be. Many of these have not been mapped accurately at all. They might be mapped accurately in a small geography, but not throughout their range. There's a lot of mapping work to do. I'll talk a little more about that. But the Species Explorer, once we do have a mapped ecosystem, the Ecosystem Explorer, once we do have a mapped community or ecosystem type, will allow us to drill in and see, again, all the species that might be found in that ecosystem and get other information. The one that we have really developed already, this is the actual, recent, a few weeks old image of it. This is the History Explorer, Historical Quote Explorer. So these are these georeferenced quotes and also some georeferenced old historic maps that Gabrielle's been working on. And you can drill in geographically, and as you zoom in, they will sort of open or separate from one another as you drill in. So here we are drilled into sort of Arkansas, Tennessee, northern Mississippi, and Alabama. And you can see these quotes are actually georeferenced. So each one will have an error or a level of precision here, which is this bar across the top on the right in the quote details. But you can click on one, it will open up and read about a grassland, some evidence for grassland or other ecosystem that was in a specific spot at a certain time. It's going to be a really great data set. And then that brings us to the mapping. So the mapping has to be ongoing. We often show this map, which is really a sort of coarse map that we developed with NatureServe as an early part of this project. And we're not saying that all of these areas in green are treeless grasslands. We're saying these areas in green included a large areas of open ecosystems. So this could be savannas, open woodlands, marshes, all the different of our 12 major types. But that's not what we really want. We really want to drill in and say this particular ecosystem occurs in this spot, or did historically occurred in this spot, and here's information about it. So we've been sort of developing that and improving it over the last couple of years. This is something we were working on for National Geographic that we hope to improve enough to be published in the future. Sometimes we are working to model natural communities based on physical attributes of the landscape, soil, slope aspect, fire compartment, different things. Chip's going to talk more about that. But these are just some examples of an area with a lot of savanna, woodland, and prairie in northwest Arkansas that I've been working on, where these different landforms and ecosystems correlate with different levels of open ecosystems, different types of open or closed ecosystems. And those correlations can be used for the modeling, which is something we're doing. Things like slope and aspect, totally different natural communities on different aspects and slopes here in the Ouachita Mountains, Arkansas and Oklahoma. We've worked through on other projects doing detailed natural community. This is a 9.5 million acre area that we did with Steve Simone with his ecozone mapping as part of a Cumberland Plateau status assessment and grassland conservation plan. It's about to be released. And it was really interesting because we did just the the typical biophysical settings and modeling approach. And then we noticed that it wasn't matching up with history in places like the Molten Valley, where we knew there were a lot of open ecosystems historically. We weren't really picking those up with the modeling approach. And we integrated some historical data from the GLO land survey records and modified the model to incorporate what we learned from that, and really changed these tan areas or open savannas and woodlands in the Molten Valley. Other places we have really great data, mapping data, but only for a small area, like this Biometa watershed potential natural vegetation map, which is really pretty darn good, but it's in such a small area. We want to make through Grasslandia even these small data sets available to users where they can access and download those. Some grassland ecosystems in the Southeast can't be modeled. They have to be mapped from aerial imagery, things like glades and barrens. You can't really model where those are. Approaches that have tried to model those, it hasn't worked. And we're going in and doing the tedious work to map those. This was done by Paul Nelson in Arkansas, Missouri. Excellent model for how to do that work. These are glades and barrens in that ecoregion. Looking at GLO survey records and, of course, plat maps to look 200 years in the past and see where these things are. Georeferencing these data sets is a high priority. A few of them have been done. This is another one from Arkansas showing a prairie in the GLO records from the 1820s and 30s. Those have been mapped for Arkansas and for Missouri of the historical prairies in the GLO. They haven't been done, for example, for Oklahoma, also in that same shares those ecoregions. And we're working on that now. We have a project ongoing to georeference the plat maps from the GLO survey in Oklahoma, digitize the prairies, bring those in to a data set which we can share in the future, and looking into even LIDAR imagery west of the Mississippi River. Many of our grassland types in the Southeast have these pimple mounds or nebkas in them, these ancient windblown dune features. And those are a great indicator that grassland was there historically, even though today sometimes they're forested. And we've done some really interesting work looking at quantifying the amount of erosion or degradation of these mounds and being able to correlate those with prairie remnants or savanna or woodland remnants that are now kind of closed but were open historically, and areas that have been degraded and destroyed. Really useful data set. And with that, I will just briefly say we do have 2 Future Explorer apps pending funding that we're working on. One is a conservation planning app, which will be really great. This is some work we just did for that Cumberland Plateau using modeling approaches and species occurrence data and habitat modeling to determine high impact conservation areas we call megasites. And with that, I'll turn it to Chip.
Thanks. And I'm going to take
sharing.
over. Yeah,
All
thanks.
Right. Got it.
All right, thanks, guys. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak here. I'm going to talk about a portion of the mapping strategy that we are attempting to accomplish. This is an early preview of our historical tree canopy cover map. Proof of concept. We're not complete yet, but we want to give you an early preview. So, what are we trying to accomplish here? As Dwayne said, we've got a 500 million acre focal area. We want to map at a 1/4 acre resolution. That's 2 billion pixels. But we recognize that there's going to be some uncertainty, and we're going to factor that uncertainty into our results. The proof of concept map is really pretty basic. We're just focusing on 3 things: slope pH, soil pH, and moisture. We plan to do a lot more, and I'll cover that in a minute. So this is a portion of our map, and dark green, full forest, going through the oranges, woodlands, into yellow savannas, down to light blue open. I'm going to toggle, so Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, just for those of you kind of understand what community, what area we're talking about. What I want to do is I want to toggle between 2 things here. And we feel like in our proof of concept, we're overestimating openness of our more open areas. And this is an alternate data set that we're using as a control. We feel like this particular portion, and again, notice the difference, particularly in the coastal plain. We feel like this is overmapped. This is over canopy, and this is too open. So we're beginning to use validation to try to hone in on a really accurate map. So what I want to do is I want to take this ecoregion by ecoregion. Here we are with 65 southeastern plains. This is a level 3 EPA ecoregion. And again, I'm going to toggle between 2 closed and 2 open. Let's go up to Piedmont. Again, same kind of thought process, but it's a lot closer. Again, notice there's a lot of savanna that we're predicting in the Piedmont. We don't believe that there is full forest canopy in the Piedmont, and this proof of concept is indicating that in a spatial form. Moving up to Blue Ridge, obviously heavily forested, although there's a little patch south of Asheville and a little bit more with our more open model. I will say that Cades Cove is mapped as savanna and a little bit of prairie. Okay, this is the ridge and valley. And again, I'm going to toggle 2 closed, maybe 2 open. This was definitely the superhighway during the settler period of settlers moving from Pennsylvania along these valleys into the Mid-South and into Alabama. Here's the Cumberland Plateau, more formally known as Southwestern Appalachians. Again, Sand Mountain in northeastern Alabama, really showing up as savanna. And then let's talk about ecoregion 71, the interior plateau. Again, some differences between 2 closed and perhaps 2 open. Now let's zoom in a little bit. This is looking directly at Chattanooga, really close to the borders between Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee. We've got the Southwest Appalachians on the left, Ridge and Valley on the right, and let's toggle between those 2. You're really seeing the valley structure in the Ridge and Valley. Our control data set predicts more closed. Our open data set, proof of concept data set predicts more open. Somewhere between the 2. Sand Mountain is really showing up, lighting up as savanna. A little bit less with the control data set. Now let's zoom in even further. And here we are. Here's Dalton. We're completely inside Georgia now. We're really seeing some fine scale detail. And again, too closed, perhaps too open. So we've looked at the map, but how can we quantitatively validate this model? We've got a series of ideas. One of those ideas is using iNaturalist data. There are very many iNaturalist readings, and of the plant readings, of which there are well over 10 million in our focal area, there are 7.9 million records that are research grade, that is validated observations with GPS locations less than 15 meters in GPS location uncertainty. It's a very valuable data set. Obviously, not every observation is useful for this particular project. So what we did was we focused on a certain subclass of observations. Remember back to Theo's portion where he was talking about heliophily and coefficient of conservatism. So in this, we're showing the conservative sun and shade dependent plants, where the sun dependent plants are yellow and the shade dependent plants are blue. You will not be surprised that we're seeing heavy concentrations of shade dependent plants in the heavily forested areas of the Blue Ridge and the mountains north of there. But we're seeing a lot of sun dependent plants. And those sun dependent plants are not just on the coast. There are readings, you can see those through the Piedmont, coming through the southeastern plains, even up in Middle Tennessee, and in a broad amount of them through Arkansas, Texas, and up into Oklahoma. I'm going to leave you on a cliffhanger on this. We're doing some analysis of how this data set compares to our data set. We will, in the future, make that information available as part of our continuing work. So, what are the other validation data sets that we're going to use? Well, I want to have a shout out to the CCAS organization. They've got a grassland savanna extent raster that we are actively looking at. It's some really cool stuff that we've admired for some time. Beyond that, local and sub-regional historical vegetation maps are really important. We feel like that work, even at a local level, really informs our larger work. As Theo mentioned, we've got GLO prairie outlines. And beyond that, we've got witness tree records from both GLO and meets and bounds surveys from the 1700s to early 1800s. Beyond that, we're going to have expert reviewer reference points, folks like Dwayne and Theo and other botanical and ecological experts saying, based on their extensive knowledge, what they believe the canopy cover was at its specific locations. Beyond that, again, as Theo mentioned, we're going to have modern day remnants listed, glades, barrens, and balds that obviously weren't going anywhere. And then we're going to draw from Gabrielle's work for curation of historical maps and historical quotes. And I'll ask at this point, we know that we haven't captured everything from validation data sets. And if you know of any validation data sets, historical data sets that you think might inform and improve our work, we welcome you to provide those data sets. And even beyond that, we'd like you to consider working with us. So we had a very basic 3-variable approach to generate the proof of concept. We're going to deep dive into quite a few categories of ecological drivers. And a lot of nerd knobs to really dial in the mechanisms by which, say, a wet prairie is distinguished from a flat land, flat woods or swamp. There are a lot of different approaches that we're evaluating. We are not sure which of these are going to survive our evaluation, but these are the types of things that we're considering. And one thing that I'll point out is that we feel like we want a set of drivers that perform across the 500 million acres, but we do recognize that there are ecoregion level differences that we want to capture, such as high elevation in Blue Ridge and over in the Arkansas mountains. So I'll finish up by saying we welcome your participation in our project. We're going to do 4 review cycles from late spring through late summer, and we would love for you guys to assist us in validating our map. We're going to have beta copies available for y'all to kick the tires on. We're not going to release a map that has not been vetted across our focal area. So with that, I'd like to finish up and then allow you guys to ask questions, not just on my part, but across the board with Dwayne and Theo's sections as well.
Great. Thanks you all so much for a fantastic presentation. It is so exciting to see where this project is headed. We definitely do have time for questions. I would say at least 10 or 12 minutes. So we've got great participation on this webinar, 64 participants, fantastic turnout. So with that many people on the line, I'd say I'll probably direct traffic a little bit more carefully. So if you wouldn't mind using the raise hand function or dropping your question into the chat, I'll read that aloud for the benefit of the recording, whichever you're more comfortable with. So I'll go ahead and pause and see what questions we have. I see Nathan Field's hand. Go ahead, Nathan.
All right. Is there any capacity in the website design phase to create like logins that might be able to provide individual members or contributors to be involved and engaged in a community format, to where whether there's a forum section or whether there is an opportunity to be listed as a rising contributor or something that might be accessible to a lot of people who might not be involved in the ecologist, or they might not be a ecologist grade level contributor, but just might be a citizen science who wants to participate in the life of the community.
Chip, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, yes, and I'll, Dwayne and Theo, feel free to back me up. Nathan, I think that's a really good idea. It's not something that was on our roadmap, but this is exactly the kind of feedback that we really appreciate. And I'd like to see what we can do to tackle that. And if you'd like to assist us as we kind of think through this, we'd really appreciate, taking a little bit deeper dive on this. Again, thanks for the recommendation.
I'll just add that we are starting to really ramp up some volunteer opportunities around some of the data sets that we're trying to build. Things that people can do from home on the computer, georeferencing, digitizing, mapping those prairies, for example, from the GLO. We have talked about it would be nice to have a way where people could sort of log in and upload, or for example, historical quotes. If you know of a bunch of cool grassland quotes in your area and you wanted to georeference those, you could upload those and log in and upload those to a bucket that would then be vetted by people that are working on our staff and then incorporated in. Of course, you get credit for submitting those. So we have talked about that. We haven't built that option yet, but that part was at least in our discussion pool. Great ideas. Thank you.
right, I'm turning my attention to the chat. We've got a few suggestions on data sets, including EPA's StreamCat data, a similar platform potentially being developed by the Landscape Partnership. We've got a question from Jean. The large-scale mapping was done by Mark Anderson with Nature Conservancy, in which he found calcareous substrate to be an excellent predictor for unique systems. Would that be a consideration in your predictive mapping? Also, secondly, Healy Hamilton found that aspect was an excellent information for management under climate change. Wondering if that's related to your heat index or could be used to indicate unique systems. One of you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I'll tackle that. Yeah, those are two things that we feel like are really valuable. Theo showed a couple of pictures where aspect was just obvious in in that mountain view. We're going to take it a little bit deeper on the heat load index. We're going to do slope and aspect, but we're also going to bring in latitude. And that's kind of a subtle point of, sun shining in Florida is hitting at a more direct angle than sun shining in Pennsylvania. So a southern aspect in those two areas has an important difference, and we're going to try to model that difference. And on the calcareous side, absolutely, pH is hugely important to our work, and not just pH, but the specific parent rock and the soil characteristics. So we're diving deep, literally, and we'll see what we can get out of this.
Thanks so much. Looks like there's a request in the chat from Ryan about sharing the link to the heliophytic rankings and C ranking scale. I think Dwayne acknowledged that. Any other questions?
I'll type a response. I'm typing a response to Ryan with some links.
Yeah, and Ryan, I just put in a link here as well. I'm going to put two links in as well, Theo, but go ahead and add your response also.
Yeah, okay.
Nice little testimonial in the chat from Nathan. And a suggestion of historicaerials.com satellite records.
That's a great suggestion. Let me just jump in. The further west you get, the more valuable that data set. And the reason is that, as Dwayne and Theo showed, the migration of people westward basically destroyed the grasslands before scientists and aerial photography was able to capture. So that's part of our challenge, particularly in the along the Atlantic coast and the Piedmont. So thanks for that recommendation. I think it's really valuable.
We can definitely take some more time for questions if anyone else wants to shoot their hand up or drop something into the chat.
Hillary, let me respond to your point. Quarter acre, yeah, that is, we're definitely using 30 meter. I just wanted to describe it in terms that are, a little bit less nerdy. Everybody can say, well, quarter acre. Yeah, my house is quarter. That helps.
No, I appreciate that. We'll use that as our shorthand too sometimes when trying to explain like the resolution of the blueprint. I was just kind of curious to confirm if that was the same resolution of CCAS's data, which it is, and hopefully we'll and NLCD and a lot of other, foundational data sets. So fingers crossed that that's something that we're able to align with the blueprint and CCAS's work as that data becomes available. Another question from Jean Brennan. Is there a way to be able to monitor changes due to invasives infiltrating these unique systems?
So we've got a three-phase mapping approach that we're going to attempt to pull off in the next 5-ish years. First is just the canopy cover percentages. Second is we're going to do our dangest to model abiotic vegetation, or abiotic land units as we're calling them, and then map historic vegetation onto those at a defensible level. Third is bringing in modern data and being able to do a departure analysis, pixel by pixel, and say, what did it change to? One of the things we're going to be looking at is Google DeepMind's Alpha Earth, which is a phenomenal data set released mid last year. This is overwhelming work. My brain is bursting trying to put this stuff together, but we're making progress.
I'll comment too that since you all mentioned CCAS's grassland and savanna extent indicator, that's something that we also use in terms of progress tracking in our CCAS goal report. And I know one specific example of trying to kind of wrestle with the role of invasives has been dealing with mesquite encroachment in Texas and Oklahoma. And we have really good vegetation maps there where we've been able to say, hey, with the level of mesquite encroachment here, this is really no longer functioning as a grassland as it would have historically. And so I know that's something really tricky to try to capture, but it's something we're at least attempting to account for in certain states in the CCAS goal report when we look at grassland and savanna area changes over time. And Rua, if you were here, could speak to that in more detail, but that's my kind of high level understanding. That's a great question, Jean.
And let me talk one last point about that. Satellite imagery is improving year after year, and we're getting really close toward speciation, as they say, being able to identify specific species. We're still not quite there, but invasive species green up earlier in the year, and we can use that even now. We haven't really factored that in, but we plan to be able to model year over year how things are going, from that perspective.
Great point.
And some small patch grassland ecosystems habitats green up early, like fens and bogs and things with a lot of sedge diversity. I've had luck mapping those from infrared leaf off winter imagery. That could be scaled up.
Right. I'm going to say we have time for one or maybe two more questions before we need to wrap up. I do want to make sure I'm able to preview next month's webinar because it's going to be continuing this grassland conservation and restoration theme. So I think a lot of folks on the line may be interested in that as well. Another question from Jean and from Wiley. Can drone data be used to inform managers in these grasslands? And then from Wiley, how are new sites that may have higher conservative coefficients being prioritized for identifying?
So drones, I love drones. The problem is that we've got 500 million acres. And so satellite imagery and other techniques are more appropriate at regional levels. However, locally, drones are fantastic. There's a whole field of what they call photometry. I'm not getting that right, but the ability to take fine scale aerial imagery and generate really detailed information that is different than fine scale LiDAR data. They're both hugely important. Obviously, LiDAR scales dramatically more than drone data, but drone data can give us views that are really impossible to see with LiDAR.
Thanks, Chip. Does anyone want to comment on that idea of prioritizing sites with higher conservative coefficient?
I think I'll take a shot at it. I'm not 100% sure. So Wiley, if I'm not answering the question, just say. I think what you're asking is, are we able, when we find sites with species of high coefficients of conservatism, or what we'd call a high floristic quality index for a site, and we know it's a remnant grassland, how would we prioritize those maybe for conservation? The answer is that's the holy grail, is to find these special remnants that we don't know about. I mean, a lot of times the heritage programs have knowledge of some remnant grasslands in their area, but oftentimes there's a bunch that we don't know about. Maybe they're off the roads. They've never been found with aerial imagery, and they're out there. We've been blown away by some that we found under our noses even. a great story. We have a project where we're working in 40 national parks, and some of them are up in sort of our northeast region. And we were told, yeah, there's no remnants in any of these parks. And our staff found like a 150-acre grassland remnant at Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania Battlefield Park, and are in the process of restoring that now. So it's an incredible site with a lot of cool grassland heritage still intact. So plants really are the key. If you just learn to read them and understand what they're trying to tell you, it's incredible. I don't know if that answered exactly what you were looking for.
Well, it's a fantastic positive note to end on. Wiley, please feel free to chime in if you wanted to clarify your question. But
no, that hits it. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks.
Hillary, if I may, just as
Sure.
a quick, we are actively building out and set to release Grasslandia 1.0, hopefully at the end of the year. But we're already planning and trying to assemble the funding and partnerships needed to launch Grasslandia 2.0. So if you're interested in partnering, if you know potential funders or funding opportunities that could help us get there, it's not just the three of us. There's literally a team of over a dozen, maybe nearly 24 people who are working on this across multiple organizations. So please do let us know and contact us if that's of interest. We want to create a tool that really can help reduce the barriers that we all face in trying to understand, map, and restore grasslands. And ultimately, we want a tool that empowers people, everyday people, whether you're landowners or your school teachers or your park stewards. We want to put the power in your hands to be able to better understand and manage and restore and reconstruct native grasslands of the South.
thanks, Dwayne. And I know Dwayne put his and Theo's contact information further up the chat if you wanted to reach out about partnership or funding. Hopefully we will be having y'all back this time next year to do a live demo of Grasslandia 1.0. So excited to see that be unveiled. So with that, I am going to cut off questions just looking at the clock. I want to wrap up by previewing next month's Third Thursday Web Forum, which will be on February 19th and 10 a.m. Eastern Time, just like today. And I will put the registration link for this webinar in the chat. I suspect it's going to be likely of interest to folks because it's going to spotlight grassland and savanna restoration and conservation efforts across multiple states. We'll have a panel of we're shooting for 3 different presenters representing state fish and wildlife agencies in the Southeast. We're still nailing down exactly who our speakers are going to be, but tentatively, I think it's going to be Mississippi, Georgia, and likely Missouri, each speaking for 15 minutes or so about what their state agency is doing to make progress toward grassland conservation and restoration goals. So I think that that's likely to be a great one to tune in for February 19th, and that registration info I just dropped into the chat. We don't have any staff updates today, so I'll just conclude with this slide. I always like to wrap up by reminding people how to get more involved in the Southeast Conservation Adaptation Strategy or SECAS partnership. A really easy way is to join our newsletter, which you can do on the footer of any page of our website, secassoutheast.org. You'll get 2 emails a month, and that's it. One, a monthly newsletter, kind of sharing the latest updates from the partnership, ways to get involved. And the second is a reminder email about this Third Thursday Web Forum series, so that you'll never miss a presentation on a topic that you're interested in. All our staff contact information is on our website. And of course, we definitely encourage you to explore the Southeast Conservation Blueprint and let us know how it's working for you. As always, if you would like help from our team in incorporating the blueprint into your work, whether that's a conservation plan, informing a decision, strengthening a grant, we can write letters of support or contribute to your proposals. That user support is completely free, and we would love to assist you in getting your conservation work accomplished. So with that, I will stop sharing and wrap up for the day. But if there was some last parting question that's just burning that you need to get answered, I'll pause one more time. Hearing none, just a huge round of applause. Thank you, Theo, Chip, and Dwayne. Fantastic presentation. Really appreciate you all being here today, and hope you all have a fantastic 2026 that we'll see you in February for more good grassland stuff.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.